Good. Again, to continue with some of the good points that Prof made earlier. I mean, Article 25 of the Constitution talks about the progressively free education, where government is expected to, if you like, fund for education.
Yeah.
But you see, we don't have to stop at 25.1. You go to 25.2, which talks about the private inclusion of education. What happened to our private secondary schools when we started a free SHS? What happened to them? I mean, if we see education as a common good, which, I mean, helps in the development of the country, or which is the key agent for the development of the country, then you want to include the private participation as well. But when we went into free SHS, what we did was to completely, if you like, wipe off the private secondary schools. So now we're forcing to push everybody into the public secondary schools, while the private secondary schools remain vacant. There are huge investments there, and for a government that talks about capitalism, that talks about private business development and all that, and to have forgotten that education is an article of trade under the WTO, what do you call it? The World Trade.
Okay.
Because it's service provision. So if you want to do quality education and you wipe off private participation, and I've heard people say that after all, the government does not choose the schools for the students, and that is the students' choice. So why should they be forced when the issue of private participation came in? Okay, so the issue of overcrowding in the schools, which Prof alluded to, would have somehow been reduced if we've had a good plan that involved the private secondary schools.
But I think that's also the case that some private senior high schools were also on board. Some of them took some of the students. Remember, especially when it is that their union also came out with their own disagreements and issues. That call was made to them that if you have space in your school, make it available, and even after the whole event, some other students were allowed the opportunity to reapply to some of these schools. So I think that to an extent there's that room, but you'd also agree that the reality here in Ghana when it comes to the senior high school education is that the vast majority of people take interest in the public schools. And that's something that has always intrigued me, that at the basic level, you would find that the private schools do very well as against the public schools, but it's the other way around when we go to the senior high school. So it for me, it makes sense that more people and the government, if the state is interested now to provide education, that's where that attention and the focus is going to be. Does that really mean that we are disenfranchising private institutions?
Okay, so back to where you started from. What has happened to the private participation in the free SHS? What has happened to them? I mean, if you want to do quality education, you have to put everything on the level playing field. Okay, where I mean other jurisdiction where students are placed in the enrollment system, and then those who qualify within the specified grades are enrolled into the various schools. So you don't see one school as bad and the other one as being good. But when you begin to put them apart, that is where the problem comes in. So again, to the issue of private participation, it has not been very good. We can go back and check that it has not been very good. They've not been adequately involved in the free SHS. If not that, why do they have a lot of space and we are still running all these double track systems with the public schools?
Is it also not the case of cost? Because you would agree that especially for private schools, usually in terms of the average fees that they charge as against what we get in the public schools, private schools usually charge higher. That also means that if the state is working with a certain budget and given how much ordinarily you pay in a public school, unless of course private school owners are willing to take the extra cost that will come, I can understand why there will be such a challenge.
See, we can go out there again and check. Usually people make these statements, but you'll be surprised that the teachers in the public schools earn better salaries than those in the private schools, because the private is private. I mean, go check even from the basic levels. Check how much teachers in the public schools are paid and how much some private schools are paying their teachers. Okay, you see that it's far less. Yet, the teachers in the private schools, I mean, talking about the basic, teaches the children better and they do well.
But you agree that does not ultimately translate into a case that they pay less. If the owners of private institutions are exploitative and they are taking so much but are giving their teachers so little, but the government is taking so little and giving teachers so much, it does not necessarily
mean that if the money that the government spends in the public schools, for which reason it does not get the results that is required, if that money is given to the private schools, they can do better. See, this has been done in other countries like India, where private schools that are doing so well have been given the opportunity to adopt some public schools. Okay? And that money spent in those public schools have been given to them to use. And there has been a transformation. All what we are saying is that the schools are overcrowded. Whilst you have the private schools that can accommodate some people. So even whilst we wait, like Prof said, in building the infrastructure, like getting more schools in order to progressively advance into the free SHS, which wouldn't have given us the problems of this double track where students go to school 2 weeks. I mean, I was talking to somebody, he said a child went to school for 2 weeks and then came home and it's returning in March. And even that, they did not even write exams before